In the fascinating and enigmatic biblical narrative, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah stand out for their tragic fate and the powerful moral lessons they embody. These ancient cities, immortalized in the pages of Genesis, are known for having been destroyed by a direct act of God. The reason for this divine destruction, according to the biblical narrative, lies in the depth and severity of the sins committed by their inhabitants. This episode, laden with symbolism and moral warnings, has been the subject of study, debate, and interpretation throughout the centuries, both in religious contexts and in historical and archaeological research. The precise nature of the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah has generated extensive debate and diverse interpretations over time. One of the most widespread and debated perspectives suggests that the destruction of these cities was a divine punishment for the practice of homosexuality, an interpretation that has been supported by various religious traditions throughout history. This point of view has significantly influenced the way homosexuality has been viewed in different cultures and eras, often linking it with divine punishment. In some interpretations, especially in the Islamic context, the inhabitants of Sodom are considered as the first homosexuals in history, and this perception has had legal and social repercussions in various countries. On the other hand, there is an alternative interpretation suggesting that the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah were not exclusively centered on sexual practices, but included a wide range of reprehensible behaviors. According to this view, the inhabitants of these cities repeatedly violated the norms of hospitality, a practice highly valued and respected in the cultures of the ancient Near East. They are also attributed with acts of violence, lack of justice, and a widespread contempt for established moral and social order. This perspective highlights the complexity of the biblical narrative and the multiplicity of lessons that can be drawn from it. The book of Genesis describes how God, observing the great depravity and wickedness in Sodom and Gomorrah, decides to intervene directly. The biblical narrative details how Jehovah, dismayed by the extent of corruption in these cities, sends two angels to assess the situation. The angels, received in the city of Sodom by Lot, a righteous man, witness the violent and hostile behavior of the inhabitants. This episode culminates with divine intervention, where a rain of fire and sulfur falls from the sky, completely eradicating Sodom, Gomorrah, and their residents. Throughout history, the search for archaeological evidence of Sodom and Gomorrah has fascinated many. Archaeologists and scholars have proposed various theories about the location of these cities and the nature of their destruction. Some hypotheses suggest that natural phenomena, such as earthquakes or explosions of asphalt deposits in the region, could have contributed to the destruction, later interpreted as an act of divine wrath. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah continues to be a topic of great interest, both from a religious and historical and archaeological point of view. Its interpretation has varied over the centuries, reflecting the diversity of cultures and beliefs that have interacted with this biblical text. These cities and their final fate offer a window into the complexities of ancient narratives and the moral lessons that these stories have transmitted to successive generations. The coexistence of Abraham, his nephew Lot, and the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah was marked by significant tensions, exacerbated by the attitudes and actions of the citizens of these cities. According to classic Judaic texts, like the Mishnah, the sins of Sodom went beyond mere wickedness. They are described as a society deeply rooted in usury and an obsession with wealth and possessions, behaviors seen as antithetical to piety and respect for the sacred. Rabbinic writings amplify this negative image by comparing the Sodomites to Procrustes, a character from Greek mythology. This innkeeper, who mutilated or stretched his guests to fit an iron bed, symbolizes cruelty and disdain for human life, characteristics attributed to the inhabitants of Sodom. The story of how Theseus gave Procrustes an ironic end further highlights the brutality of these practices. Abraham emerges as a counterpoint to this wickedness. Faced with the news of the corruption of Sodom and Gomorrah, provided by the two angels, Abraham challenges God with ethical questions, pondering the value of just life in the face of injustice. His question about whether God would destroy the city if there were 50, and then only 10 righteous people, reveals his concern for justice and divine mercy. This dialogue with God shows the depth of his faith and his commitment to justice. The visit of the angels to Sodom, where Lot offers them hospitality, marks a crucial point. The hostility of the Sodomites towards these strangers reveals their depravity. Lot, faced with a furious crowd, offers his daughters in a desperate attempt to protect his guests. This moment underscores the gravity of the situation and the extreme moral conflict that Lot faces. The angels intervene, saving Lot and his family and blinding the aggressors, an act that demonstrates both their power and their mercy. The escape of Lot's family is marked by the tragic transformation of his wife into a pillar of salt. Her act of looking back, despite the warnings, is commonly interpreted as a transgression that reflects the difficulty of completely abandoning a sinful past. This moment captures the complexity of human nature and the severity of the consequences of disobeying divine instructions. The story of Abraham, Lot, and the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah is a narrative that intertwines themes of justice, faith, and human nature. Through these events, concepts of piety, mercy, and the inevitability of divine judgment are explored, offering valuable lessons on moral conduct and ethical responsibility. The story of Lot's wife, narrated in Genesis 19:26, is one of the most intriguing and symbolic in the Old Testament. The verse specifically mentions, "But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt." Although the Bible does not provide a name for Lot's wife, later Jewish traditions identify her as Edith. This same figure is also mentioned in New Testament texts, such as the Gospel of Luke, and in Islamic narratives that speak about the descent of Lot. The reasons for her transformation into a pillar of salt are interpreted in Judaism and other religions as a consequence of two actions: her disobedience to the angels and her secret longing for the sinful life of Sodom, revealed in her act of looking back. In relation to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19:24 and 25 vividly describes this event. "Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground." This biblical passage has led to Sodom and Gomorrah becoming synonymous with destruction and desolation, a recurring theme in other passages of both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. Deuteronomy, written approximately between 300 BC and the beginning of the Common Era, reflects on the destruction of these cities. Deuteronomy 29:23, for example, says, "And that the whole land thereof is brimstone, and salt, and burning, that it is not sown, nor beareth, nor any grass growth therein, like the overthrow of Sodom, and Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his anger, and in his wrath." This passage underscores the magnitude of the destruction and serves as an eternal reminder of divine power and wrath in the face of iniquity. Furthermore, the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is compared with the tale of the Levite's concubine in the book of Judges. This episode narrates the Benjamite war triggered by an atrocious act of violence against the concubine of a Levite, highlighting themes of injustice and the need for divine intervention in the face of human wickedness. The prophet Isaiah in his book uses Sodom as a symbol of sin and the imminent destruction for those who stray from God's path. Isaiah chapter 1 verses 9 and 10 establish a clear association between the wickedness of his contemporaries and the infamous cities, warning of a similar fate if they persist in their iniquity. These verses emphasize the importance of obedience and fidelity to God, using the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah as a powerful reminder. In the biblical context, several prophets have referred to Sodom and Gomorrah, associating them with various sins and immoral behaviors. The prophet Jeremiah in particular links Sodom with adultery and hypocrisy. In Jeremiah 23:14, he harshly criticizes the prophets of Jerusalem, saying, "I have seen also in the prophets of Jerusalem a horrible thing. They commit adultery, and walk in lies. They strengthen also the hands of evildoers, that none doth return from his wickedness. They are all of them unto me as Sodom, and the inhabitants thereof as Gomorrah." This comparison underscores the profound corruption and moral decay that Jeremiah perceived in his society, equating the wickedness of Jerusalem with that of Sodom and Gomorrah. The prophet Ezekiel also references Sodom, but focuses his criticism on other aspects, such as pride, idleness, and an abundance of bread. In Ezekiel 16:49, he describes the wickedness of Sodom as follows: "Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom, pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters, neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy." This description highlights how material excess and neglect of the needs of the most vulnerable were seen as grave sins in the eyes of Ezekiel. Additionally, Jesus of Nazareth in the Gospels mentions Sodom and Gomorrah on several occasions. In Matthew 10:14 and 15, Jesus says, "And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear your words, when ye depart out of that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment, than for that city." Here, Jesus uses Sodom and Gomorrah as examples of places that will face severe judgment, warning that those who reject his message will face an even worse fate. In Luke 17:28 and 30, Jesus also refers to Sodom to illustrate the sudden arrival of the kingdom of God, saying, "Likewise also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom it rained fire and brimstone from heaven, and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed." Lastly, regarding the sexual interpretation of Sodom and Gomorrah, these cities have historically been turned into symbols of sexual sins. The term sodomite, derived from the name of Sodom, has been used as a synonym for homosexual in many contexts. Sodomy, defined by the Royal Spanish Academy as the practice of anal intercourse, is considered in many religions as a sin against nature. In some Islamic countries, sodomy is even punished with the death penalty, reflecting extreme intolerance towards certain sexual orientations. Additionally, there are theories suggesting that Sodom and Gomorrah could have been destroyed by natural disasters, such as earthquakes or massive fires, which would coincide with the biblical description of destruction by fire and brimstone. These hypotheses seek to find a historical foundation in the biblical narrative, although concrete archaeological evidence is still a topic of debate and study. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah in biblical texts and classic Jewish writings is profoundly rich and detailed, revealing various aspects of the behavior and consequences of the inhabitants of these cities. According to the accounts, not even Abraham's personnel were spared from the abuses of Sodom. The texts highlight a significant lack of hospitality and cruelty towards foreigners in Sodom and Gomorrah, including practices such as extortion at bridges and rivers. It is recounted that Eliezer, sent to Sodom by Sarah, Abraham's wife, to inquire about Lot, suffered these abuses. This episode illustrates the depth of wickedness in Sodom, where even envoys of respected figures like Abraham were not safe. Regarding beggars in Sodom and Gomorrah, Hebrew writings narrate such severe hostility towards foreigners that nobody wished to visit these cities, not even in emergency situations. It's said that beggars were pushed towards death, and a particularly moving story recounts how a poor woman and a rich woman were burned alive for sharing resources with each other, illustrating the brutality and lack of compassion of the inhabitants of these cities. According to Jewish tales, God's patience with Sodom and Gomorrah ran out due to their crimes. It is mentioned that a daughter of Lot was burned alive for giving bread to a poor person, and another woman who gave water to a traveler was cruelly punished and exposed to bee stings, dying slowly. It is believed that the screams of this woman reached the heavens and were heard by God, which finally convinced the Lord of the need to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. A stream of scholars holds that the punishment of Sodom and Gomorrah had no sexual connotations, but was due to their lack of hospitality and other negative behaviors like arrogance and gluttony. This interpretation is based on Ezekiel 16:49, where the wickedness of Sodom is described as pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness. In Islam, the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah are considered to have been the first to practice homosexuality. The Quran contains references to the people of Lot, associating them with homosexual practices. Some contemporary Islamic scholars believe the disaster was caused by a combination of homosexual practices, violation of the law of hospitality, and theft. In Islam, it is believed that one of the angels who took Lot out of Sodom was Gabriel. The Quran points out that Lot's wife was left behind and became a transgressor for looking back while fleeing the city. A Gnostic text, the Paraphrase of Shem, offers a different perspective on Sodom and Gomorrah, suggesting that the inhabitants of Sodom knew gnosis or enlightenment before their destruction. This text, part of the Nag Hammadi library, describes the intervention of a demon in human form in the city's destruction. Finally, it has been speculated that Sodom and Gomorrah could have been devastated by an earthquake. Although there is no concrete archaeological evidence of their existence, some experts suggest they were located near the Dead Sea and that an earthquake around 1900 BC, originating in the East African Rift, could have been the cause of their destruction. Studies of the area suggest it was fertile and suitable for agricultural activities, supporting the possibility that prosperous cities like Sodom and Gomorrah could have existed there. The mystery surrounding the existence and destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah has been a topic of great interest for both archaeologists and biblical scholars. One of the most significant clues about these cities comes from the archaeological site of Tal el-Hammam in Jordan, located in the fertile Jordan Valley. This site is notably large, and the remains found suggest human occupation extending for at least 2,500 years, until approximately 1700 BC, when the site was suddenly abandoned. The remains of adobe walls at Tal el-Hammam indicate that the place could have been destroyed by a sudden catastrophic event. Particularly intriguing is the evidence of pottery subjected to extremely intense heat, to the point that the outer parts of the clay objects melted, forming a glassy layer. These findings, presented by researchers from Trinity Southwest University and the Department of Antiquities of the Kingdom of Jordan, have sparked speculations about the nature of this devastating event and its possible connection to the biblical narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah. A theory that has gained attention is that Sodom and Gomorrah could have been destroyed by the impact of an asteroid. At Tal el-Hammam, researchers have found zircon crystals in the vitrified layer of the pottery, an indication that extremely high temperatures and pressures were reached, similar to those generated by an astronomical impact. Additionally, glass spherules have been found at the site, similar to those discovered in impact zones on other parts of Earth and on the Moon. These tiny spheres form when the impact of a celestial body vaporizes the ground, and then drops of the vaporized material solidify as they fall back to the surface. However, there are aspects of this theory that present contradictions, such as the lack of a visible impact crater, and discrepancies with the biblical chronology that places these events in a different era. These inconsistencies have led some researchers to consider an alternative scenario, the destruction of Tal el-Hammam, and possibly Sodom and Gomorrah, by the impact of a comet. A comet exploding over the desert could generate temperatures high enough to melt rocks and artifacts, but without leaving an impact crater. Additionally, the spherules found could be explained by the disintegration of meteoroids as they pass through the Earth's atmosphere, dropping spheres similar to those formed by asteroid impacts. Another intriguing piece of the puzzle comes from a Sumerian tablet, studied by experts from the University of Bristol. This tablet, dated to June 29, 3123 BC according to the Julian calendar, mentions an asteroid about 1 kilometer in size. Researchers suggest that if an asteroid of such magnitude impacted near Mesopotamia, the resulting shockwave and temperatures could have reached the Jordan Valley, which would align with the high temperatures needed to create the vitrified layer observed at Tal el-Hammam. Lastly, many specialists consider the possibility that the level of the Dead Sea may have risen in the past, covering the place where Sodom and Gomorrah are presumed to have been. The book, The Light of Remote Antiquity, published in 1959, proposes, based on careful geological and archaeological research as well as literary evidence, that the biblical cities of the plain might have been located in a place now submerged under the Dead Sea. The idea that the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah could be hidden under the desert sands or submerged under the waters of the Dead Sea continues to fuel curiosity and debate in the scientific and religious community. These investigations and discoveries keep alive the mystery and fascination with Sodom and Gomorrah, offering possible scientific explanations for events that have been narrated for millennia in sacred scriptures. The search for archaeological evidence continues, with the hope that future discoveries may shed more light on these legendary cities and their ultimate fate. I hope this in-depth study of the lands of Sodom and Gomorrah has provided you with valuable data and information, and I invite you to share this content with your loved ones, family and friends, so that they too may benefit from these valuable insights. Until next time, and may God bless you.